Intro in the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean lies a region so infamous, so shrouded in mystery, that it has captured the imagination of scientists, sailors, pilots, and storytellers for decades. This is the Bermuda Triangle, a stretch of ocean connecting Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, forming a triangle that has swallowed ships, devoured planes, and left behind questions that remain unanswered even today. Some call it a natural danger zone, others whisper about aliens and sea monsters, while many believe it is a gateway to another dimension. But one truth stands above all. The Bermuda Triangle is the stage of stories where reality often feels more terrifying than fiction. Tonight, we dive deep into this enigmatic abyss, exploring the unexplained vanishings, eerie survivor accounts, and the chilling silence of those who never returned. What really happens in the Bermuda Triangle? Is it a curse, a scientific phenomenon, or something beyond human comprehension? Stay with me till the end, because by the time this journey is over, you might question everything you thought you knew about our world. The first major story that cast the Bermuda Triangle into global spotlight dates back to December 5, 1945. It was a crisp afternoon at the Naval Air Station in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Flight 19, a training mission consisting of 5 powerful Avenger torpedo bombers, prepared for what seemed like a routine exercise. The young pilots were confident, their engines roared with authority, and their orders were simple: practice a bombing run, then return home. No one had the faintest idea that within hours, these aircraft and all 14 men aboard would vanish without a trace, becoming one of the most baffling mysteries in aviation history. As the flight took off, everything appeared normal. Radio checks were clear, the weather was calm, and visibility stretched far across the horizon. But just about 90 minutes into their mission, things began to unravel. Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor, the squadron's leader, reported strange compass malfunctions. His instruments gave conflicting directions, spinning wildly as though some unseen force disrupted Earth's magnetic fields. The pilots, already several miles offshore, grew disoriented. In desperation, Taylor's voice echoed across the radio. "We are not certain of our position. We can't be sure where we are." Minutes turned into hours, and the situation deteriorated rapidly. The squadron drifted further off course, running low on fuel. The last transmissions from the pilots were chilling, filled with panic and uncertainty. "We can't make out land. Everything looks wrong. The ocean doesn't look like it should." Then, silence. Despite massive search and rescue efforts involving over 300 boats and planes scouring more than 300,000 square miles of ocean, no wreckage was ever recovered. Not a single trace of the men or their machines was found. The disappearance of Flight 19 was shocking enough. But the mystery only deepened when a rescue plane sent to find them also vanished, this time carrying 13 crew members. Witnesses claimed to see a bright flash in the sky before the rescue aircraft disappeared from radar. Just like the bombers, no debris was ever recovered. 2 vanishings, back-to-back on the same day, in the same area. Suddenly, whispers began to spread. Was there something sinister lurking in the triangle? For decades, conspiracy theories have flourished around the fate of Flight 19. Some suggest violent weather patterns or sudden rogue waves could have swallowed the planes whole. Others blame methane gas eruptions from the ocean floor, strong enough to disable engines. But there are also those who believe the squadron was pulled into another dimension, a time warp, or even abducted by forces not of this earth. The truth remains unknown, but what cannot be denied is the chilling legacy Flight 19 left behind. This single event transformed the Bermuda Triangle from a simple stretch of ocean into a household name, feared and respected worldwide. It was the first major chapter in a saga of disappearances that would stretch over decades, a saga that continues to terrify and fascinate us to this day. But Flight 19 was just the beginning. There are countless more stories of ships and planes that set out on ordinary journeys, only to meet extraordinary ends. And in our next scene, we'll step aboard one of the largest vessels ever lost in the Triangle, a ship so massive that its disappearance seemed impossible. In the year 1918, during the height of World War I, the United States Navy faced one of its most baffling tragedies, one that remains unsolved to this day. The ship was the USS Cyclops, a massive collier vessel measuring more than 540 feet in length and weighing over 19,000 tons. It was built to carry coal, supplies, and most importantly, men who were needed on the war front. The Cyclops was no ordinary ship. It was the largest vessel in the U.S. Navy at the time. Strong, dependable, and seemingly indestructible, it earned the nickname the Navy's workhorse. But even the mightiest workhorses can stumble. And for the Cyclops, its stumble turned into a vanishing act unlike any other. On March 4, 1918, the Cyclops departed from Barbados in the Caribbean, carrying over 10,000 tons of manganese ore, along with more than 300 crew members and passengers. The weather was calm, the sea appeared manageable, and Captain George W. Worley seemed in control of the mission. The ship's destination was Baltimore, Maryland. Yet somewhere between Barbados and Baltimore, across the waters of the Bermuda Triangle, the Cyclops simply disappeared. No distress signal was ever sent. No debris was ever found. 300 men and a vessel the size of a skyscraper were erased from existence as though they had been swallowed. By the ocean itself, the United States Navy launched one of its largest search efforts in history at the time. Warships were deployed, patrol aircraft scoured the horizon, and reports flooded in from ports along the Atlantic, but not a single trace was discovered. Even more disturbing, the ship's last radio messages suggested no trouble. In fact, the Cyclops was reported to be moving steadily along its course, showing no signs of distress. Then suddenly nothing. It was as if the ship had slipped into another world. Theories began to emerge, each one more haunting than the last. Some believed the Cyclops had been torpedoed by a German U-boat, considering the timing of World War I. However, there was no evidence of an attack, no oil slicks, no floating wreckage. Others claimed a violent storm might have capsized the ship, but meteorological records reveal that no such storm occurred along its route. Another chilling possibility was sabotage. Rumors swirled that Captain Worley had German sympathies, raising suspicions of betrayal. But again, nothing concrete was ever proven. Then there are those who look beyond the boundaries of science and politics. They suggest that the Bermuda Triangle itself holds the answers. Was the Cyclops caught in a massive rogue wave, a natural but deadly wall of water capable of sinking even the largest of ships in seconds? Or did it encounter something far stranger, an invisible vortex, a magnetic anomaly, or even a dimensional rift that pulled it into oblivion? With no evidence left behind, the mystery of the Cyclops remains one of the most enduring disappearances in maritime history. To this day, the USS Cyclops holds a dark record. It is the largest loss of life in U.S. Navy history not involving combat. Over 300 souls vanished into silence, their families left with no answers, only grief and questions. And as the decades passed, the Cyclops became yet another chilling entry in the Bermuda Triangle's growing list of victims. A story that warns us that even the strongest and most advanced vessels can vanish when they dare to cross this cursed patch of ocean. One of the most haunting maritime tales of the Bermuda Triangle involves the disappearance of the SS Marine Sulphur Queen, a massive tanker measuring 524 feet long. Built during World War II, this ship had been converted into a carrier for molten sulfur, a dangerous cargo, but one that was regularly transported across the seas. By February 1963, the Marine Sulphur Queen was scheduled to make a routine trip from Beaumont, Texas, to Norfolk, Virginia. With 39 experienced crew members aboard and 15,000 tons of molten sulfur secured in its massive tanks, the voyage seemed straightforward. Yet, like so many before it, the ship would never complete its journey. On February 4, 1963, the Marine Sulphur Queen set sail under relatively calm conditions. The weather was far from threatening, the sea state was moderate, and no technical issues had been reported. The crew carried out their duties as usual, checking the tanks, monitoring the engines, and keeping radio communication steady. But somewhere off the southern coast of Florida, near the edge of the Bermuda Triangle, everything changed. Just 4 days after departure, all communication from the Marine Sulphur Queen abruptly stopped. The massive tanker, its crew, and its cargo disappeared entirely. When the ship failed to arrive in Virginia, the U.S. Coast Guard launched an intensive search operation. Aircraft, ships, and radar systems combed the ocean for any sign of wreckage. For days, search teams worked tirelessly, but nothing substantial was found. The only evidence to ever surface were a few scattered life preservers, a broken piece of rubber, and a few scraps of oil-soaked debris. None of it was enough to explain how a vessel of that size could simply vanish. The families of the 39 men aboard waited in despair, but answers never came. Investigators later raised concerns about the tanker's design. The molten sulfur cargo it carried had to be kept at extremely high temperatures, and there were fears that the heat might have weakened the ship's structure. Some experts suggested that a sudden explosion could have ripped the vessel apart, sending it quickly to the bottom of the sea. Yet no explosion was ever reported by nearby ships or detected by coastal monitoring systems. Moreover, the debris found was minimal, hardly the kind of widespread wreckage one would expect from a catastrophic blast. As with many Bermuda Triangle mysteries, the lack of evidence left the door open to stranger explanations. Could the marine sulfur queen have been pulled into a violent undersea current, dragged downward into the abyss with such force that no debris remained? Or did it suffer the same fate as Flight 19 and the Cyclops, falling victim to a phenomenon beyond human comprehension, magnetic anomalies, energy fields, or even some unknown technology buried beneath the ocean floor? Theories range from the scientific to the supernatural, but none can fully explain how a 1,000-foot-long ship could simply disappear without a trace. The disappearance of the marine sulfur queen added a new dimension of fear to the Bermuda Triangle legend. Unlike the Cyclops, this was not a wartime tragedy, clouded by rumors of submarines or sabotage. Unlike Flight 19, this was not a squadron of inexperienced pilots. This was a modern tanker with trained professionals, solid engineering, and a clear route. And yet, it still became another ghost swallowed by the Triangle. For sailors and families alike, the story served as a grim reminder. Once you enter those waters, no matter how strong or prepared you are, you might never return. Among the many disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle, one stands out not only for the loss of life, but for the chilling detail that when the ship was finally found, it was completely abandoned. This was the case of the Carroll A. Deering, a 5-masted schooner often called the ghost ship of the Bermuda Triangle. Built in 1919, the vessel was a majestic cargo ship designed to haul coal across long distances. In August 1920, the Deering set sail from Virginia toward South America with a seasoned crew. But by the time it was discovered in early 1921, the ship was found eerily adrift near Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, without a single person aboard. The voyage of the Carroll A. Deering started smoothly. Captain William H. Merritt was originally in command, but due to illness he had to step down in Barbados. Command then shifted to Captain Willis B. Wormel, a veteran seaman who had spent his entire life at sea. His new crew was an eclectic mix of men from around the world, some with reputations that were less than perfect. The ship continued its journey, successfully delivering its cargo of coal to Brazil. But it was during the return trip north through the Bermuda Triangle region that things took a dark and mysterious turn. On January 29, 1921, the Deering was sighted by a lightship near Cape Lookout, North Carolina. The crew reported that something seemed off. The man who hailed them was not the captain, but another crew member. Even stranger, the crewman said the ship had lost its anchors and seemed disorganized. The following day, the schooner was spotted again, this time stuck on a sandbar off Cape Hatteras. When rescuers finally boarded the vessel, they were struck by an eerie sight. The ship was completely abandoned. There was no sign of the captain, the crew, or even the ship's logbooks. The galley showed signs of food being prepared, as though the crew had vanished suddenly in the middle of daily life. The disappearance of the crew baffled investigators. There were no bodies, no lifeboats, and no evidence of foul play. The ship's navigational equipment and documents were missing, but everything else remained relatively intact. What could cause an entire crew to abandon a seaworthy vessel in such haste? Some suggested mutiny. The crew, unhappy under Captain Wormel, may have staged a rebellion and escaped in the lifeboats. But if so, where did they go? And why were none of them ever found? Others speculated piracy, but no valuables appeared to have been stolen from the ship. Then came the whispers that the Bermuda Triangle itself was involved. The Deering had sailed through the infamous waters, and many wondered if it had encountered some kind of anomaly. Could the crew have been struck by sudden madness, disoriented by magnetic disturbances? Or did they fall victim to something unexplainable, perhaps a supernatural force that plagues those who dare cross the Triangle's path? The sheer absence of evidence, coupled with the haunting emptiness of the ship, made the case one of the Triangle's most chilling mysteries. The Carroll A. Deering remains an unsolved enigma, often called one of the greatest maritime mysteries in American history. Unlike the Cyclops or the Marine Sulphur Queen, the ship itself survived. But the people aboard were erased as though they never existed. To this day, theories continue to swirl, but no definitive answer has ever been found. The Deering serves as a haunting reminder that sometimes it's not just ships or planes that vanish in the Bermuda Triangle. It's people, their lives, and their stories, leaving only questions behind. While many Bermuda Triangle mysteries involve large ships and squadrons of aircraft, one of the most chilling stories is tied to the disappearance of an entire commercial airliner, a plane carrying dozens of passengers that vanished into thin air. This was the case of Flight DC-3 NC-1 2002, a routine passenger flight traveling from San Juan, Puerto Rico to Miami, Florida. In December 1948, on board were 29 passengers and 3 crew members. For many, this was just another trip home in time for the holidays. For others, it was a journey of work and business. But for everyone aboard, it would become their final flight. The DC-3 was one of the most reliable aircraft of its time, known for its strength and dependability. The crew that night included Captain Robert Lindquist, an experienced pilot who had flown countless missions before. The weather, while not perfect, was considered manageable. Radio communication was clear as the plane made its way over the waters of the Bermuda Triangle. At 10:30 p.m., Captain Lindquist radioed Miami for landing instructions. His voice was calm, confident. There was nothing unusual. Yet just minutes before reaching the Florida coastline, the aircraft disappeared from radar. No distress call was ever made. The plane simply never arrived. The Coast Guard immediately launched a massive search operation covering both sea and air. They looked across hundreds of miles, scanning the horizon for wreckage, oil slicks, or even survivors in lifeboats. But the result was chillingly familiar. Nothing. Not a single piece of debris, not a life jacket, not a scrap of metal was ever found. It was as if the plane had dissolved into the night sky, taking with it all 32 souls. The investigation raised troubling questions. The last radio contact from Captain Lindquist had suggested the plane was just 50 miles away from Miami. How could an aircraft vanish so close to its destination, in a region where radar coverage and rescue operations were active? Some experts pointed to electrical failure or fuel shortage, but even in those cases, the plane should have ditched into the water, leaving behind floating wreckage. Others argued that sudden wind shear or a violent downdraft might have pulled the plane into the sea. Yet again, no wreckage supported this theory. Conspiracy theories, as always with the Bermuda Triangle, soon followed. Some believed the aircraft had been swallowed by a sudden vortex, pulled into another dimension. Others speculated about alien abduction, pointing to the complete lack of evidence. A few claimed that magnetic anomalies had caused the plane's instruments to malfunction, leaving the crew disoriented and off course until disaster struck. The Bermuda Triangle had once again claimed its victims, leaving only speculation and sorrow in its wake. The disappearance of Flight DC-3 is particularly haunting because it involved ordinary people, families and travelers, individuals who had no connection to military missions or secret cargo. They were everyday passengers whose lives ended in an unsolved mystery. For their loved ones, there was no closure, no graves, only endless questions about what happened that night. And for the world, the case added another chilling entry to the long list of vanishings within the Triangle, one that proved the mystery was not limited to warships or squadrons, but could strike anyone, anywhere, at any time. In October 1954, a commercial flight known as Flight 441, a U.S. Navy Super-Constellation aircraft, embarked on what should have been a safe and routine journey from Patuxent River, Maryland, to the Azores Islands in the Atlantic. The aircraft was enormous, a 4-engine transport plane designed to carry military personnel and cargo across long distances. On board were 42 passengers and crew members, most of them military families and servicemen. But somewhere over the Bermuda Triangle, this massive aircraft, like so many before it, disappeared without leaving even the faintest trace behind. The Super-Constellation was considered state-of-the-art at the time, equipped with advanced navigation and communication systems. Before takeoff, the weather reports showed mild conditions, clear skies, light winds, and no indication of danger. The crew carried out all checks, and the aircraft departed without issue. For several hours, everything went smoothly. Communication between the plane and air traffic controllers was clear, steady, and routine. But just after midnight, somewhere in the triangle's invisible boundaries, Flight 441 vanished. No distress signals, no mayday calls, just silence. The sudden disappearance triggered one of the largest military search operations of the 1950s. U.S. Navy ships and aircraft scoured the waters, covering thousands of square miles. They expected at the very least to find debris, floating fuel tanks, or even life rafts. Yet despite days of intensive searching, nothing was ever recovered. It was as though the massive plane and all 42 souls had simply evaporated into the night sky. For the families waiting at home, the news was devastating. Their loved ones were gone without explanation. Another victim of the Bermuda Triangle's sinister reputation. Investigators scrambled to piece together possible causes. Some suggested catastrophic mechanical failure, like a mid-air explosion or engine fire. But there had been no warning signs, no radio distress call, something highly unusual for trained Navy pilots. Others blamed sudden violent storms, but meteorological data from that night showed nothing out of the ordinary. The most troubling detail was the total absence of wreckage. Even in the case of ocean crashes, the sea nearly always gives something back. A floating wing, a seat cushion, or traces of fuel. But here, the sea remained silent. This silence gave rise to darker theories. Some claimed the plane was drawn into a sudden downward air current so powerful it drove the aircraft into the ocean with such force that it shattered instantly, sinking too quickly to leave debris. Others whispered about time warps and magnetic anomalies, suggesting the plane may have flown into a rift in time and space. The more imaginative linked the disappearance to alien abduction, pointing out how quickly and completely the aircraft was erased. Whatever the truth, Flight 441 was now yet another unexplained casualty of the Triangle. For the U.S. Navy, the loss was more than just personal, it was symbolic. Here was one of the most advanced aircraft in their fleet, flown by skilled servicemen, yet it had been swallowed whole by the Triangle without explanation. For the public, the disappearance deepened the growing fear that no amount of technology, training, or experience could guarantee safety in this stretch of ocean. The Bermuda Triangle was proving itself to be the great equalizer, capable of erasing warships, schooners, tankers, and even the most advanced planes with terrifying ease. In the mid-1960s, the Bermuda Triangle's reputation grew even darker with the mysterious disappearance of a small but sturdy passenger aircraft, the C-119 flying boxcar. Unlike giant tankers or naval bombers, this was a twin-engine transport plane known for its reliability. On June 5, 1965, the aircraft took off from Homestead Air Force Base in Florida, destined for Grand Turk Island in the Bahamas. On board were military personnel and essential supplies. The flight path was routine, the weather reports were calm, and everything pointed to a safe journey. But as history has shown us, once a plane enters the Bermuda Triangle, the ordinary can quickly become extraordinary. For the first few hours, communication was steady. The pilot gave routine updates, reporting clear skies and steady altitude. Then, somewhere near the southern edge of the triangle, the transmission stopped. There was no mayday, no distress call, no indication of mechanical failure. The silence was chilling, like a switch had been flipped. Radar controllers watched in confusion as the aircraft's signal simply vanished from their screens. In a matter of seconds, the flying boxcar had disappeared, leaving no clue as to what had gone wrong. The disappearance of a military plane demanded immediate action. Search and rescue operations were launched almost instantly, with naval ships and aircraft sweeping the waters. But as in so many Bermuda Triangle cases, the results were frustratingly empty. No wreckage was ever found, no oil slicks, no floating debris, no survivors clinging to life rafts. For the families of the servicemen aboard, the loss was a nightmare. Their loved ones had seemingly been erased by the sea. Without reason, without explanation, investigators looked into every possible scenario. Could the plane have suffered catastrophic engine failure? If so, why hadn't the crew radioed for help? Even in the worst cases of mechanical trouble, trained pilots almost always send a distress call. Could the weather have suddenly shifted? Meteorological data revealed no such storm in the area that day. Some suggested the aircraft may have crashed violently, sinking immediately into the deep trenches of the Atlantic. But again, the lack of debris was baffling. Planes don't simply vanish without leaving behind fragments. With no scientific explanation, the legend of the Bermuda Triangle once again filled the void. Some theorists believe that sudden magnetic anomalies had scrambled the aircraft's instruments, causing the pilots to lose their bearings and fly directly into disaster. Others argued that the triangle acts as a kind of dimensional gate, swallowing anything that enters during certain atmospheric conditions. The most dramatic speculations included alien abductions and time distortions, each theory fueled by the eerie pattern of sudden, total disappearances. The loss of the C-119 flying boxcar added to the growing unease of military and civilian aviators alike. If even experienced pilots flying dependable aircraft under clear skies could vanish so completely, then no one was safe within the triangle's invisible borders. By the late 1960s, the region's reputation was no longer just sailors' folklore. It was a documented danger zone, where reality itself seemed fragile, and where every journey carried the risk of never returning. In 1971, a small twin-engine aircraft known as the NC-1602 Piper Navajo took off on what should have been a simple flight across Florida and the Bahamas. The pilot was experienced, the weather was clear, and the flight plan was straightforward. Yet, somewhere within the Bermuda Triangle, the plane and its passengers simply disappeared. What makes this case so unnerving is not only the suddenness of the disappearance, but also the bizarre radio transmissions that occurred in the moments leading up to it. The pilot had been in routine contact with air traffic controllers, reporting smooth conditions and steady altitude. Then, without warning, his voice crackled across the radio, filled with confusion and fear. He reported that his instruments were acting strangely, the compass spinning wildly, and his navigation systems no longer responding correctly. He described the skies as different and strange, as though the environment around him had shifted. Controllers attempted to guide him back toward Miami, but within minutes, his signal vanished completely. Rescue operations were launched immediately, sweeping both the sea and the skies for days. Once again, nothing was found. No wreckage, no bodies, no sign of a crash. What unsettled investigators the most was that the pilot's last known location had been relatively close to Florida's coastline, not far out in the open ocean. In theory, any accident in this area should have left behind debris that could be recovered. Instead, the sea gave up no secrets, and the Bermuda Triangle claimed yet another victim. This case mirrored other eerie accounts from pilots who survived strange encounters in the Triangle. Several aviators over the years have reported sudden instrument malfunctions, compass needles spinning uncontrollably, and disorientation despite clear skies. Some have even claimed to see strange glowing mists or walls of cloud that appear out of nowhere, enveloping their aircraft. For the NC-1602 Piper Navajo, it seemed as though the pilot experienced one of these phenomena, but unlike others, he never emerged from it. Theories about this disappearance range from magnetic field disruptions to sudden weather anomalies invisible on radar. Some scientists have pointed to the unusual geography of the region, with its deep underwater trenches and shifting currents that might create sudden and violent updrafts or downdrafts. But others insist the case fits a far stranger pattern, that of aircraft entering a different dimension or slipping into a time distortion that removes them from our reality entirely. The pilot's final words describing the skies as strange continue to haunt anyone who studies the case. The loss of the Piper Navajo in 1971 reinforced the Bermuda Triangle's reputation as a place where even short, routine flights could become fatal mysteries. It was not the size of the ship or the plane that determined survival here. It was sheer chance. For every vessel that crossed safely, another would vanish without explanation. And for the families of the passengers aboard the NC-1602, the Bermuda Triangle was not just a story of legends. It was a nightmare that left them without answers, only silence. By the late 1970s, the Bermuda Triangle had already earned its infamous reputation, yet the disappearances didn't stop. One of the most unsettling cases occurred in December 1978, when a chartered aircraft known as Flight 626, a Douglas DC-3, vanished while carrying 10 passengers and its pilot, Irving Rivers. Unlike other disappearances that occurred far out at sea, this one took place in almost perfect visibility, close to its destination runway in St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands. What makes the story chilling is how the plane was tracked on radar, right up until the moment it suddenly ceased to exist. Irving Rivers was an experienced pilot, familiar with the region and its flight paths. The night of December 1st was clear, with excellent weather and no storms in sight. Rivers had made radio contact with air traffic controllers, confirming his approach and receiving clearance to land. Controllers even watched his aircraft's signal steadily moving toward the airport. Everything seemed completely normal, until within sight of the runway, the DC-3 disappeared. The radar signal blinked out. The radio went silent. The plane never arrived. The airport control tower was stunned. The aircraft had been just minutes from touchdown. The Coast Guard was immediately dispatched, launching a massive search across the surrounding waters. For several days, ships and planes scanned the area, expecting at least some floating debris or evidence of a crash. Yet, as with so many other triangle vanishings, nothing was ever found. It was as though the plane had been plucked from the sky in full view of the world, leaving behind no trace whatsoever. Investigators ruled out the most common explanations. Weather had been calm. The pilot was not a novice. He was highly skilled and in regular contact until the very last moments. Mechanical failure might have occurred, but again, why was there no distress signal? Even if the plane had suffered a sudden engine failure, it should have been able to glide to a crash landing, leaving behind wreckage. Instead, the triangle delivered its signature outcome: total erasure. Theories surrounding the disappearance of Irving Rivers and his passengers range from magnetic field disturbances to sudden downdrafts. Some aviation experts speculated that the plane may have been overwhelmed by a microburst, a sudden, violent downward rush of air invisible to radar. But this still did not explain the complete absence of wreckage. Others turned to more supernatural possibilities, suggesting the aircraft was pulled into a dimensional rift or absorbed by some unknown energy field unique to the triangle. The case of Flight 626 remains one of the most disturbing because of how close the plane was to safety. Unlike other vanishings that occurred far from land, this disappearance happened almost within sight of the runway lights. For the families waiting that night, the pain was unbearable. They had expected to embrace their loved ones within minutes, only to be told the plane had never arrived. For the world, it was yet another reminder that in the Bermuda Triangle, even when safety seems within reach, the abyss can open and take everything in an instant. Among all the stories of the Bermuda Triangle, perhaps none are as symbolic as the disappearance of Flight 19 in December 1945. This was not just one plane, but an entire squadron of 5 U.S. Navy Avenger torpedo bombers that vanished during a routine training mission. On December 5th at around 2:10 p.m., Flight 19 departed from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, under the command of Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor. The weather was reported as fair. The pilots were well trained, and the mission was straightforward, a simple navigation and bombing exercise. But within a few hours, they would become part of the Triangle's most legendary mystery. As the flight progressed, something began to go terribly wrong. Radio transmissions picked up confusion among the pilots. Lieutenant Taylor's voice grew increasingly panicked as he reported his compasses were malfunctioning. The planes seemed unable to determine their position, circling endlessly in search of land. Strangely, other pilots later recalled hearing Taylor say, "Everything looks strange. Even the ocean doesn't look as it should." These eerie words captured the helplessness of men who felt they were trapped in a place where even the sky and sea had turned alien. For hours, communication was sporadic. At one point, the pilots thought they saw the Florida Keys below them, but their instruments disagreed. Dusk began to fall and fuel levels dropped dangerously low. The last transmission from Flight 19 was chilling. "We can't tell where we are. Everything is wrong. We can't be sure of any direction. Even the ocean doesn't look right." Then, silence. No distress beacon, no final coordinates. The 5 planes carrying 14 crewmen simply disappeared. The Navy wasted no time, dispatching a massive search and rescue operation. Dozens of aircraft and ships scoured the area. But the Triangle had one more cruel twist to deliver. One of the rescue planes, a PBM Mariner carrying 13 men, also vanished without a trace while searching for Flight 19. In the end, the entire rescue attempt turned into an even greater tragedy, with 6 planes and 27 men gone, swallowed whole by the sea or something far stranger. To this day, no confirmed wreckage from Flight 19 has ever been recovered. Some skeptics claim the squadron may have become disoriented and crashed into the ocean after running out of fuel. But others argue that 5 experienced pilots could not all suffer the same navigational breakdown simultaneously, especially under relatively clear skies. The simultaneous disappearance of the rescue plane only deepens the enigma. Was it a coincidence, or a sign that something truly unexplainable operates within this patch of ocean? Flight 19 has since become the cornerstone of Bermuda Triangle lore, the story that cemented its place in popular imagination. For some, it symbolizes the dangers of human overconfidence against the raw power of nature. For others, it represents a mystery too great to be explained by logic alone, proof that there are still forces in this world, or beyond it, that we do not understand. Whatever the truth, Flight 19 remains the Triangle's most haunting legend, a reminder that sometimes the line between science and the supernatural is razor-thin. And so, we reach the end of our journey into the Bermuda Triangle, the place where compasses spin wildly, planes vanish into clear skies, ships dissolve into nothingness, and families are left with only questions. From the eerie silence of the Cyclops to the near-landing disappearance of Flight 626, and finally to the legendary mystery of Flight 19, the Triangle continues to haunt both science and imagination. But perhaps the greatest question is this: is the Bermuda Triangle truly cursed by forces beyond our understanding, or is it simply a coincidence of natural dangers amplified by human fear? Could the truth lie in rogue waves, methane eruptions, and magnetic anomalies, or in something far more unsettling, like portals to another dimension? The Triangle has never revealed its secrets fully, and maybe that's why it continues to captivate us. It stands as a symbol of mystery itself, an endless riddle, daring us to explore, yet warning us to stay away. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into one of history's most haunting mysteries. If you enjoyed unraveling these tales, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more journeys into the unknown. Until next time, stay curious, and remember, the ocean keeps its secrets well.